so we're back to facts only,
Yes.
and I get to be the questioner. That feels good.
Special guest.
Special guest questioner. Anyway, so today we're talking about Nigerian music genres that are not in the mainstream, at least maybe not anymore. So we're talking Fuji, we're talking Apala, we're talking Were, and we're talking Dadakwada, like, you know, place like they sing in places I come from. So, what happens to these genres anyway?
I mean, I think we should first talk about the origin of some of these genres.
Yeah.
Some of these genres came alive because, so ethnically in Nigeria, we have dominant sounds. For example, in my hometown, right, my family has its sound.
Yeah.
Right? They call it Iliodoli. It's different, yeah. And in my hometown, which is Ikoro-Ekiti, there's a sound called Akiri.
Wow.
Yeah, so the moment they play that sound, it gets to a level where, so when they are playing it, the old men of the house have to tell the people that are playing those drums to calm down because it can get into your head. And yeah, it's that crazy. So those genres and those sounds sort of grew because maybe some of them were in more mainstream places, say like Ibadan, not Ikoro-Ekiti, a small town from Ekiti State, or not even Ado-Ekiti, the biggest town in Ekiti State. In Lagos, it's Aleko somewhere, or something from Ibadan. Maybe something that the rich people liked, or maybe even in the East, it became something that everybody could understand and digest. So that's how I'll say if Fuji started off, Apala started off. Apala was the language of the elite. It was elitist music, right? The rich people used to love it. They used to diss each other with it. It's not like Fuji. It's not as fast paced. It's calm. The people that perform in Apala will sit down and they'll be dishing it out. So all the rich people will just come there. They'll be dancing. They'll be calm. So when they want to abuse that person, you will abuse the person for them. But Fuji was more of a street culture kind of thing. The younger people, Apala, older people like Apala, but you might not exactly have the class to be able to command an Apala singer. You might not have the money. But Fuji is it's obtainable everywhere. All the streets, every young person wanted to be a Fuji artist. That wanted to make it, wanted to manipulate their voice like a Fuji artist. They wanted to do this, they wanted to do that. But you will know that the Fuji thing, when it started, it was mostly started by a lot of Muslims. When you look at it critically, the biggest superstars of Fuji were Muslims in the early days. Even till now, you will seldom see a Christian person be a Fuji artist. I was speaking with someone recently, and the person had the theory that because of the way Muslim prayers go and the way people manipulate their voices for Muslim prayers, that's why it makes sense that Fuji was some sort of a Muslim thing. So then you talk about Highlife, which was like, it was bigger in the eastern part of the country, but in the West, we had a conversation on a Twitter space about Orlando or some months ago. Yeah, it was a Highlife
singer. Yeah.
So these genres then became, the youth are like the vibrancy of the society depends on the youth. So like when our parents were growing up, they were consuming some of these folk genres. Like some of these genres are built on the back of folk sounds, like they are recognizable patterns, African sounds, percussion based, right?
So if we look at, what the music sounds like now, especially if you look at the evolution of Afrobeat and Afropop in Nigeria, you can see some elements of some of these old sounds. I'm particular about Fuji because back in the day we had people like LKT who kind of introduced Fuji into Afropop. So it was very common in the songs coming out then that you have the regular songs, maybe a rap verse, maybe Fuji in between, and then the song will continue. But right now we don't even have that anymore. We have full-on tracks with Fuji influence. How do you think Nigerians, young people now, are consuming that?
So when you look at how those records, like I was talking about the young people the other time.
Yeah.
Our parents, for example, they were consuming some of these genres. Like when they were growing up, they were consuming Juju, they were consuming Apala, they were consuming some of these genres. And so Fuji, for example, had like two eras. When Clarence Peters was telling us about like the 78 or 76 era and then the 91 era.
Yeah.
So it's like the attitude era of WWE and like the pre-attitude era. So before then, there was not a lot of confrontation. You were just talking about things that were obtainable. 91 era was different. So, but by the 80s, you had foreign genres that were sort of trickling
coming
down
in, yeah,
trickling down slowly. Disco, rock and roll, 70s was rock and roll, soul, funk, some of these genres. But by the time disco and electro pop in the mid 80s took a center stage, everything sort of crystallized a little bit. But by the mid 90s, hip hop and R&B, that was where everything sort of started changing for these genres.
So would you say that hip hop and R&B kicked off these genres off, kicked them off the table?
Hip hop and R&B became a competition for them, but they didn't kick them off.
Okay.
By the early 2000s, we still had like Fuji. Fuji might not have come into this era, the 1999 era of Nigerian music. I mean, Juju might not have come into it. Apala sort of made a brief comeback with
Terry.
that album, and Terry a little bit later. But Fuji, the era of the late 90s to the early 2000s, you had people like Pasuma, Obesere. They were imbibing pop culture. Pasuma started calling himself African Puff Daddy.
Yeah.
You had Shako Rashid that was African Little Bow Wow. You had
Thai currency.
Exactly. Some of these people that they were changing, like even Obesere, right? The way they were titling their records, go be careful. Some of these other things. The OG legend himself, Kwan One, the type of songs that he was making, he started infusing pop, some sounds, some contemporary sounds into his music. That was where you would know that they knew that the sound was switching. The attention economy was switching, and they tried to evolve with it. But the problem was, they really couldn't.
Why not?
Because by 99, when companies like the age and the generation that was in vogue at the time was birthed of a different sound.
Yeah.
Before, in the 70s, 80s, people, Juju and Apala and some of these sounds, Highlife, could have, the younger generation were listening, they were dedicated to those artists. But hip hop R&B became cooler. Things that are cool sort of attract people.
Yeah.
So those things, those hip hop and R&B became cooler to a different generation. So by the late 90s to 1990s to early 2000s, the generation that was meant to be carrying that sort of found something different. And attention shifted.
So do you think that attention can come back? Do you think that this generation can somehow find it cooler? I'm asking because Kwam One recently broke records with Adeori Oki, which is like a classic work that he had done before and he just remade. So do you think we're in that place where we can now get cooler Fuji?
So I saw a tweet recently.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet from a Nigerian publication that I wrote that Fuji was coming back. My shout out to Tosin and Shafa and these guys that try to do Fuji opera. It's amazing. It's an amazing idea. And someone quoted it and said that, Chrissy Idera quoted and said, do you think Fuji ever left? But the thing is this, Fuji didn't leave. He never really left. Inner city Nigerians, some people still listen to Fuji, Apala, some of these genres, they still listen to them. Highlife, Cavemen is here. Before Cavemen, there was Flavor, right? People that were doing that. But the difference is just that the way those guys were doing it, except maybe like Cavemen, that they're doing pure Highlife. The Flavor is probably more of an Afro-pop artist. You call him Highlife, but he's more of an Afro-pop artist, right? The thing with this not exactly going away is those genres stopped having like figureheads. Like you see someone like Dele Taiwo, Dele, the man that sang Bao Tere No. He was featuring a Yoruba, a rapper on a remake of his records like 2003, 2004. Aruna Eshola, Musili Aruna Eshola, when he was making his album, he had a rapper on My Dear Kilo Shetof. Like the sound was shifting. So as those things started evolving on those guys, and the new stars started getting out, so the hip hop became like the true origin story. Hip hop and R&B became the true origin story of Nigerian pop music.
And every other genre was just supporting acts.
Just supporting. Now the Afro pop we have right now is a product of different genres.
Yeah. Different
genres. Hip hop, R&B, Fuji, Juju, Apala. Because African percussion is the root of it. And African percussion is a product of African folk, right? So those let's go back to the early 2000s a little bit. Those things that those guys were doing they didn't have the figurehead superstars anymore. So the major superstars in Nigeria became like they became the Afro pop artists, the rappers, the R&B artists. And then the younger kids that were meant to be listening to those things started listening to Afro pop. They started aspiring to become Afro pop stars.
Of course.
In like the 70s, people like Bella Shmurda, Zinoliski, they would probably have been they would have been Fuji artists.
Most likely,
right? Terry Apala his voice is made for Apala music. But what did he was doing trap? He was doing trap music. Right? So the sound had changed. So they knew those guys are still like the Fuji artists because they still carry that essence. They don't realize it, but they carry that essence. The way they talk, the way they comment about society,
the language that is used.
Feel Good by Mohbad, for example. That's something that the Fuji artists would have made. So that could have said, the thing that is said on those records is something that the Fuji artists would have said in like the 90s.
Yeah.
What Naimadi was saying on Koleyewo is something that a Fuji artist would have said.
Yeah.
It's just, it was rapping with it. That's the difference.
Which makes me want to ask about budgeting and you know what this means economically, you know, for this genre right now. Because if you notice, Fuji music is that genre where the fans will always pay.
Yeah.
The fans there's a fan culture, there's a money culture with Fuji. Now, how does that translate to the industry as it is right now? If Fuji, as we say, didn't go away, but is just transitioning and is just infiltrating more into the Afropop world, what does that mean economically for the industry in general and for the artists in particular?
I like this question. The thing is very simple. Artists, currently, people that are investing in music in the music industry, a lot of them are not exactly like Nigerians anymore. And it takes people from here, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them. Like even people that are Nigerians that want to invest in record labels now are waiting for label services back to help them.
Yeah. Or
Series A funding to help them. Venture capital fund. Venture capitalists want something that is viable, product that's viable. A lot of them are going to want Afropop records because the era that we are in is happening to the world. But the thing with Fuji right now is not that there's no market for it. Remember when we were young, like all these Fuji artists, they will go on tour.
Yes.
They will come back. They will go on tour and then they will make all those videos into an entire album.
And they will do a tour record when they come back and it will be a hit.
And then they will come back and buy Bentley.
Napoli like Lagos.
They will start hailing from Chicago. You understand all those things?
I remember Napoli in Lagos album. London Delight, Oshukpasa Eat Part 1 and 2.
All those things.
Yeah.
But do we have them anymore? Some of them are still touring. But the audience doesn't exactly, it's not the same anymore. Even Kwame, when it was made a remake of some of his songs. Adeori Okin that he made, it was tilted towards a slightly Afro-pop essence.
It was literally a riff from one of his old songs.
Exactly. You remember? Exactly.
Yeah, it was a riff.
It was a riff from the old song. So it became, now it's not like there's no viability to it. It's just that Afro-pop has sort of clouded everything out.
Yeah.
It's what people want to invest in, even rappers now have to sing Afro-pop. They have to sing Afro-pop to make money.
So what does the future look like?
The future it's not that the future is gloomy because nobody can predict what's going to come back. But the way things have happened in other countries, music evolves. It evolves over time.
Yeah.
Right? Something becomes something. For example, it was classical music. Then classical music became jazz. But some people are going to tell you that jazz is like was a language of slaves. But the truth is, jazz is a more rebellious brother of classical music. That's what it is.
Pretty much.
And then rock and roll, and then some of the other genres like hip hop, and R&B, all of this. But is jazz as mainstream? as a pop or trap music? No. Is it ever going to become that? You never know, but history has shown that it's always going to be there.
So it's always going to exist to a niche audience who are willing to pay for it.
Exactly.
And elements of it will be found elsewhere.
Exactly. But because right now, look at the way these boys are singing. Bella Shmurda and Zinoliski.
Yeah.
That's Fuji and Apala.
Pure.
Pure. That's what is there.
I like Bella Shmurda.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like the way their voice is structured, it's there. But they are doing it on something else. So it's unlikely that we're going to see that in pure form for a while.
Okay.
But the thing with music is that things always come back. Look at electropop. Electropop has come back like twice over the past 7 years.
Yeah. Then we start calling it electronic dance music.
It's come back. Like Blinding Lights is electropop. That was 80s. That's 80s music. Right?
Yeah.
Bruno Mars, his last album that won the Grammy, album of the year, was electropop. And New Jack Swing, sorry. So things have a way of coming back. But the thing is, we are more likely to see a return of, say, a New Jack Swing over like, because it's those sounds are just, the market for them might not be big enough for viability. But the good thing is this, because those genres never really died, they will never die.
Yeah.
They will never ever die. So it's important that platforms that Google Be Careful, for example, that trended last year happens to remind people of our roots. So people want to go back there and experiment with it. It's important, like platforms like Fuji Opera, it's preservation. Because you never know who might be listening. The thing that a platform like Fuji Opera is going to do is, it might not create like a new wave of Fuji artists, but it's going to create people that are aware of that thing, enough to be able to create either that,
and possibly even build a new culture around it.
Build a new culture around it. Even preserving it is important.
Yeah.
It's so important. Like, one of the biggest problems we have as a generation, we don't know our roots. We don't know our story.
Yeah.
We don't know anything. So,
because we don't have documentation. We don't properly document.
Yeah. We don't.
It's sad.
We don't. It's not because we don't. I think we documented it. It's just, for example, if I go on New York Times, I see stories from 70s, 60s, because they transitioned from print to online
to digital. Yeah.
Right?
Where are the archives?
Shout out to platforms like Archiving by Fuad that they're trying to archive some of the most important stories. It's important, but it's crazy where we are. It's crazy where we are. But it's just to settle this once and for all. Did Fuji ever die? Maybe not. It didn't ever die. But did Fuji take a backseat? Yes, and that's factual.